We're now going to work with a two-point lighting system, which is ideally what most product photography and most what we would say professional studio photography uses, is a minimum of 2 lights, often 3. We actually have the ability to use 3 lights, so we have an overhead, we have a side fill, and we actually have the ability to do some underlighting, which we'll look at later. For the side fill, when we're working in conjunction with the overhead, typically we will diffuse the light again. This is already partially diffused because the light is bouncing from a white umbrella and then into the photo. As we know from our lectures that this will cause some natural diffusion to begin with. To create an additional diffusion, we can hang a sheet of ripstop nylon from this side in order to diffuse that further. This will also knock down aberrant reflections if you have a highly reflective product. We can work without the diffusion sheet, which we will look at when we're working with the side fill exclusively. In order to turn the side fill on, we simply throw on this primary switch, the larger switch of the two on the left. That will, in a moment, give me a green light, and that lets me know that the light is ready to go. I can also trip it with this test button. You'll notice that that is set to 1/3, and that is ready to go. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we are pointing at the center of the shooting table, something to that effect. Again, this sheet will stay down for this portion to create good diffusion. Now we have an automatic highlight coming from the side fill. So rather than using a reflector to bounce the overhead fill into the product, we can now use the side fill to create a highlight. That frees up our reflector to move around in the photo and create additional highlights. So let's start once again with a null shot. We're just going to use the overhead at 1/3, the side fill at 1/3, diffused with no absorbers or reflectors. We'll kill the ambience and we'll take that shot. And we should see automatically that our photo is overexposed. And that is because we have doubled our light. If you will recall, our shooting was at 1/125th of a second at f11 ISO 400 with a flash exposure compensation of -2/3. But by turning on the side fill, I have basically doubled my light. As your theory dictates, when you double your light, you move your aperture down 1 full stop. As we know, f16 has half as much light as f11. Therefore, if I now press the AV button and toggle my roller to f16, I should now have half the amount of light coming into the camera, which should compensate for the double amount of light that I'm now getting from a second light. And we'll take that photo again, and we'll notice that that looks almost the same as f11 did without side fill. Now that we look at that, we can quite clearly see again that we have a highlight, a core, and a highlight, and this time a slightly stronger highlight on the right-hand side. Now we'll bring back the absorber, and we will begin to repeat the permutations that we did in the first section. Once again, 1/4 inch from the bottom, 1/4 inch from the side. We'll position that again on the left-hand side. I want to make it clear that the absorber can go wherever you want it to go. The reason that I'm using the absorber over here is that I have a side fill over here, which should give now a strong highlight, a core, and a shadow side. We will once again kill the ambient, and we'll take that photo, and we'll see something akin to what we had with the overhead only and a reflector, but this time we quite clearly have a much stronger highlight. So we have a strong right highlight, a standard core, and now a very strong shadow side. You will also notice that there is a very non-specular aspect to that highlight. So it's very subtle, courtesy of the diffusion sheet. We can now create an additional highlight by bringing back in an additional reflector. Before, let me turn on the ambience, before we had the reflector sitting again at a 45-degree angle to carom the overhead light into the side of the product. This time, however, We're not going to have it at a 45-degree angle to above. We're now going to have it at a 45-degree angle directly facing. So once again, 1/4 inch from the bottom, 1/4 inch from the side, clamp into the recess, and this can now be positioned at a 45-degree angle in relation to the side fill. The idea is that the light from the side fill will now travel, hit the reflector, and bounce into the opposite side of the bottle. For this, you will notice that we may need to move the absorber back into space. This is not a problem, as it will continue to do what it has done before, which is to create that shadow side. This does, however, leave me some space free to now bring in the diffuse reflector. You'll notice that I'm positioning that at a 45-degree angle in relation to the side fill, and bringing that in to create an additional highlight. The convenience of this is that the absorber also hides the clip that may be exposed to your reflective surface. This should create the result of a highlight, a core, a second softer highlight, and a shadow. Let's see how that works. We'll kill the ambient, and we'll take our shot. We want to make sure that that is in frame but not in the shot. There we are. And we take our photo. And once again, we should see by pressing play that we now indeed have a secondary highlight. We now have a strong primary highlight, a subtle core, a secondary highlight, which is softer, and our shadow side. Now we are truly using two-point lighting to its greatest advantage to create multiple highlights and to create dynamic-looking photography. Let's finish this off by adding a specular aspect to the reflector so that we can get twice the amount. Once again, let me turn on the ambient. We can then see again with the stickum on the back of the reflector. I can now position that again at the base of your diffuse reflector, and that will then simply go back into position, creating our secondary highlight. Once again, make sure you're always looking through your viewfinder to make sure that it may be in frame, but it's not in the shot. I'm looking, that's 45 degrees. I should now get a secondary highlight that is specular. So we'll kill the ambience, and we'll take our shot, and the result is immediate. We can now clearly see, again, you'll see that the reflector is in the frame, but it is not in the way of the shot. I now have a strong highlight, a subtle core, a strong highlight, and a shadow. This then concludes what we can do with the basic idea of two-point lighting. Once again, there are many variations here. There are gold reflectors, silver reflectors. We can work with and without the absorber. And we can also now, if we want to, color the side fill by using a gel. We'll get back to gels when we look at underlighting later in this demo.